Chapter 107 to 111. Under Shimura Danzo's orders, the root ninja who was responsible for Uchiha Kurumi's death appeared in the lands of the Uchiha clan. His arrival immediately caused an uproar. If not for the fact that Uchiha Fugaku himself came forward, it wouldn't have been strange if the root ninja died under the siege of Uchiha clansmen before he could even reach the clan head's house. Uchiha Fugaku took the root ninja into a secret room and only allowed Shisui to be present during the interrogation. After all the clansmen left the secret room, Fugaku crossed his arms over his chest and questioned coldly, "So, why did you come here?" "I don't believe that with his character, Shimura Danzo would just send you here to die." The root ninja gulped nervously in the presence of both Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Shisui. Without any hesitation, he immediately explained every detail of the incident, and finally added, "I was worried that the person hidden in the shadows would control either me or Uchiha Shinichi to cause more damage, so I left in a hurry without any explanation." Listening to the root ninja's explanation, both Fugaku and Shisui fell into contemplation. If what the root ninja said is really the truth, then this matter is really not as simple as it may seem at first glance, and according to Fugaku's analysis, it also means that aside from the Hokage faction, there is someone else that is targeting the Uchiha clan while being hidden in the shadows. After a bit of reasoning, Fugaku questioned, "So, according to your explanation, both you and Kurumi were being manipulated?" The root hurriedly nodded. Fugaku asked again, "Then can you tell me what kind of jutsu controlled you? Was it some kind of genjutsu? Or some kind of secret technique like the shadow possession jutsu? Or some kind of body possession jutsu?" The root ninja shook his head with embarrassment. "I am sorry, I don't know." Fugaku frowned, and a fierce light appeared in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't believe the root ninja's words. At this time, Shisui suddenly activated his Sharingan and asked in a deep voice while looking into the eyes of the root ninja, "Was everything you said just now true?" Without even realizing it, the root ninja was already under Shisui's genjutsu and stated with a sluggish expression, "Yes." With the root ninja's confirmation, Shisui nodded towards Fugaku. "Everything he spoke is true. As for the better understanding, he is either himself not clear or just doesn't know at all." Nodding at Shisui's confirmation, Fugaku asked in return, "What is your personal opinion on the matter?" Shisui replied without any hesitation, "The fact that someone wants to provoke conflict between the Uchiha clan and the village is without a doubt true. Fugaku-sama, we mustn't let that person's motives succeed by playing along with his script. Even when I was in the Umbu, through some investigations I have found that even the Kyuubi's rebellion was under someone's directive. If we aren't careful, then things would get worse." While contemplating over Shisui's response, Fugaku waved his hand and added, "All right, send him out." "Yes." With a courteous bow, Shisui deactivated the genjutsu applied on the root ninja and left with him. Outside the building, Uchiha Shinichi, who heard that the root ninja who killed Kurumi right before his eyes dared to arrive at the Uchiha clan, was now feeling very excited. Initially, he also wanted to join the interrogation along with Patriarch, but since Fugaku-sama only allowed Shisui inside, so he was impatiently waiting outside to take revenge against the bastard. "Anyway, it's not like he will be allowed to leave here alive, so it's fine if I wait for a little. After all, revenge is a dish that's best served when cold," thought Shinichi when he remembered. Shinichi completely believes that Patriarch will not let the bastard leave and let him have his revenge. Squeak. At this time, the door of the building slowly opened. Shinichi Uchiha, who was impatiently waiting outside the door, immediately stared at the root ninja who followed behind Shisui's back, with clear rage in his eyes. Driven by his emotions, even his Sharingan activated itself. Looking at Shinichi's raging expression, Shisui felt sad. He could more or less understand how Shinichi would be feeling right now, but even if wanted to help him, Shisui had no choice and said apologetically, "Shinichi, calm down. The matter of Kurumi's death is not as simple as you think it is, so don't act impulsively." Shinichi was taken aback by Shisui's words, but then he suddenly realized something and shouted with anger, "What the hell do you mean by don't act impulsively? Don't let anger cloud your judgment. The Patriarch ordered me to send him away." Shisui stated helplessly. "How is this possible? You can't be serious, Shisui." Shinichi took a step back in a shocked expression, and muttered in a monotonous voice with his head bent, "Could it be that even Patriarch gave in?" Shisui noticed that Shinichi's emotions were getting unstable by the second and his chakra was flaring ragingly, so Shisui was getting worried about what kind of action Shinichi might take while being clouded in emotions, so taking a step forward, Shisui immediately activated his Manjikyu and cast a simple genjutsu on Shinichi. In just a moment, Uchiha Shinichi fainted while being under Shisui's genjutsu. Shisui stabilized Shinichi's fall and whispered calmly, "Now stay asleep, and let your emotions calm down." The root ninja looked at Uchiha Shinichi, who was easily subdued by Uchiha Shisui, and finally relaxed a little. He also knows that the Uchiha clan is not something he can deal with without Danzo-sama's backing. So, even if he is a root ninja, he isn't acting arrogantly while being inside the enemy territory. After all, his identity is useless when facing a rogue who doesn't give a damn about it. After seating Shinichi on a bench on the side, Shisui urged the root ninja, "Let's go." There is no shortage of the raging Uchiha around. Shisui knows this full well that the longer the root ninja stays here, the more complicated variables will pop out in the simple equation of his life, making it extremely difficult to determine the final result. So, as soon as he leaves, the safer the Uchiha clan will be. The root ninja also nodded hurriedly and began to walk. But before they can take even a single step forward, a cold and indifferent voice suddenly came from the side that sent chills down Shisui's spine. Does that mean Kurumi's death was meaningless? Shisui was taken aback and turned around abruptly. Most of the natural energy accumulated in his right hand has already been cleared because of continuous Tenseigan chakra circulation that Kuroto carried out in the past few days. Initially, his entire right hand up to the shoulder was petrified, but now most of the petrification has fallen and there is only slight skin hardening left that restricts his hand movement. Therefore, according to Kuroto's estimates, his hands should be back to full working condition within 3 to 5 days. Soon Kuroto read the list of visitors recorded by Shisui's clone. In the 20 days that Kuroto was out of the village, the one to visit most frequently was obviously his fiancée Hyuga Yui, then there were Kakashi and Guy, who are also part of the same team, 11, and finally, there were some other Hyuga people that visited him these days. Obviously, all of them were turned away by Shisui's clone, under the pretext of learning a jutsu in isolation. Even Yui was turned away. Kuroto smiled helplessly while wondering how he will make it up to her. Anyway, that aside, based on this information and other things, Kuroto judged that no one other than Shisui was aware or noticed his absence in Konoha, which is a good thing. After some more small talk, Shisui's shadow clone said goodbye and disappeared with a puff of smoke. At this time, Kuroto unwrapped his right hand that was bandaged carefully, and started to silently circulate the Tenseigan chakra mode around his right hand to wash out the natural energy. Although he was pretty casual about it, but with the movement of his right hand being restricted, Kuroto's combat effectiveness has dropped significantly. The most important point is that he can't use his right hand to print hand seals in this state, so until his hand recovers completely, Kuroto can't even enter into the Tenseigan chakra mode, as that also require hand seals. Not only that, but he also can't use other ninjutsu or fuinjutsu, and his taijutsu will obviously be limited. Therefore, putting every other thing aside, his top priority is to restore his right hand into the best working condition as soon as possible. Knock, knock, knock. Before long there was a sudden knock at the gate of his house. While sitting in the drawing room to continue the chakra circulation, Kuroto glanced towards the gate with the Tenseigan and noticed that it was none other than Shisui who arrived here. After simply covering his hand with a wet cloth, Kuroto opened the door and led Shisui inside while asking, "Looking at you, you seem to be in a panic, Shisui." Shisui said while still catching his breath because of rushing here hurriedly, "Kuroto-san, something happened." Kuroto wasn't surprised by Shisui's answer because while sneaking inside, he felt that there was something wrong with the village's atmosphere, and looking at Shisui's serious expression his guess was only confirmed. "Alright, come in and explain everything that happened while I was away." As soon as both were seated, Shisui immediately informed him of Uchiha Kurumi's death at the hands of a root ninja, then the root ninja's subsequent explanation as well as his personal guesses on the entire situation. After listening to Shisui's explanation, Kuroto muttered to himself, "Why is this Uchiha Shinichi involved again?" Even about 20 days ago when Kuroto was about to sneak out of the village, Shisui mentioned to him that the root ninja responsible for monitoring Shinichi strangely went missing, which caused some tension between Uchiha clan and the village. And now after 20 days, as soon as he sneaked back into the village, there is another matter involving Uchiha Shinichi that has escalated the conflict between the Uchiha clan and the village to a more serious degree. This series of events made Kuroto pay more attention to Uchiha Shinichi. Although never mentioned in the original series, Uchiha Shinichi is around the same age as Kuroto, even if his strength is not among the best within the Uchiha clan at this stage, but the fact that he has already awakened the 3-Tomo Sharingan for quite some time, so his talent is also quite evident considering his young age. After all, if that were not the case, then how come the proud and arrogant Uchiha clan sent him to confront Hyuga Kuroto? And now that he thinks about it, Uchiha Shinichi's personality is also quite straightforward, and straightforward people are the best high-class mob-class chess pieces to have. With all that clear, Kuroto muttered to himself, could it be possible that Obito has set his sight on Uchiha Shinichi? He thinks this because Shinichi shouldn't be the type of person to kill the girl he loved. Kuroto can be sure of this. And since, Obito often played around Konoha and even sneaked into the Uchiha clan's Naka shrine several times, so Kuroto can't rule out the possibility that this is all Obito's handiwork. But how come that idiot decided to act now? Shouldn't he be making his moves for Itachi a few years later? Or is it the legendary butterfly effect that's caused because of my presence? Thought Kuroto. Kuroto can't even be sure about it, because even if there wasn't any mention of such a thing happening in the original story, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, so Kuroto is a little confused. And there is also the fact the current Konoha is quite different than it should have been. The most important point is the time of defection of his teacher Orochimaru and the changes following that. Kuroto has still not figured out the real reason for his teacher's early defection. The person who spoke was none other than Shinichi, and this shocked Shisui even more. Although Shisui didn't use a very strong genjutsu on Shinichi, he did cast it using his Menjikyu. And according to common sense, Shinichi Uchiha with his fully matured Sharingan should not be able to recover so quickly. At the very least half an hour of sleep was a must. But here he is standing with an indifferent expression in less than 15 seconds. And contrary to his previous shock and rage, the indifference in his eyes at the moment sent shivers down Shisui's spine. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. Even a single wrong move might just lead everything into doom. Calming his heart, Shisui tried explaining, "Shinichi, I will explain everything to you later, things are far complicated." "Shut up." Shinichi interrupted Shisui coldly. "I know what you want to explain, but I don't care. Does it really matter? I saw him kill Kurumi with my very own Sharingan. Will the Sharingan also lie to me? Every time I see Kurumi's heart being pierced, there is only one thought in my mind: he must die. I don't care what sort of conspiracy is being brewed behind the scenes, Ichi must die for Ichi killed Kurumi." Word by word Shinichi revealed his determination to kill the root ninja along with the intense bloodlust oozing off of him. Even looking at him was scary, coupled with the 3 tomo that were rapidly spinning in Shinichi's Sharingan. Even Shisui couldn't help but gulp nervously. Shaking his head to come back to his senses, Shisui shook his head. "I am sorry Shinichi, I can't let you kill him." Shinichi nodded and slowly stretched his hands into the ninja bag round his waist, and drew 2 kunai in each of his hands, and muttered while taking a fighting stance, "Then I guess I'll have to start with you." However, before the matter could escalate any further, Uchiha Fugaku walked out of the building and shouted in an authoritative tone, "That's enough both of you." Seeing the appearance of Patriarch, Shinichi's indifference wavered as he asked expectantly, "Patriarch, why you will definitely avenge Kurumi's death, right?" But unfortunately, he got nothing but disappointment as he heard Patriarch's flat response, "He is not the murderer." Shinichi tried arguing, but Kurumi was killed by him. "I saw it with my own eyes. Who do you trust more, a root member or a shinobi of the Uchiha clan?" Fugaku looked deeply at Shinichi, and from just one look he determined that Shinichi couldn't be convinced with words alone, so waving his hand, he ordered the jonin standing around him, "Send him to the prison room and let him stay there until he calms down." "Yes." Several Uchiha jonin took action at the same moment and quickly subdued Shinichi, and dragged the desperately struggling Shinichi to the Konoha police station. While Shinichi was being dragged away, Fugaku spoke to Shisui, "Take him away." Shisui nodded immediately, and without delaying any longer, he quickly led the root ninja out of the Uchiha clan. Outside Uchiha clan gate, Shimura Danzo stood by, along with several root umbu, while tapping his crutch impatiently as he waited for some signal. Noticing that the root ninja was successfully brought out by Uchiha Shisui, Danzo's brows frowned and he sighed, seemingly disappointed with the result. Shaking his head, Shimura Danzo left with his men after giving a cold glance at Shisui from the corner of his eyes that went unnoticed by Shisui. On Kuroto's side, Hyuga Kuroto, who secretly sneaked back into the village and rushed towards his home, thought in confusion at the changing atmosphere of the village, "What unexpected thing happened while I was away? Why does it feel that the atmosphere of the village has changed greatly?" As a former member of Umbu under Hokage, Kuroto is naturally aware of many secret routes that can be used for sneaking in and out of the village, so while secretly entering the village, Kuroto was quite surprised at the tight security that was obviously strengthened compared to normal times, so he is little doubtful as to what situation is being brewed in Konoha during his absence. Arriving at his home, Kuroto breathed a sigh of relief after noticing that the shadow clone left by Shisui was still there. The shadow clone also noticed Kuroto's arrival and quickly greeted him, "Kuroto-san, you are finally back." Nodding in response, Kuroto spoke with a smile, "Thank you for the hard work Shisui." While Kuroto put some stuff aside, Shirsue's shadow clone took out a hand note and passed it to Kuroto while explaining, "This is a list of the people that visited you while you were away, Kuroto-san. I have recorded their names by the order of their visit." Shaking his head helplessly, Kuroto reached out his left hand and took the note while saying, "Ah, thanks for the extra hard work, I guess." As Kuroto read the list while holding it in his left hand, Shirsue's clone noticed that Kuroto-san's right hand was bandaged, so he asked with a slightly worried tone, "Kuroto-san, your right hand?" Kuroto didn't mind Shirsue's question and replied casually while still looking at the list, "Oh, this? There was just a small accident, nothing major to get worked up about. It should back to normal functioning in less than a week." Most of the natural energy accumulated in his right hand has already been cleared because of continuous Tenseigan chakra circulation that Kuroto carried out in the past few days. Initially, his entire right hand up to the shoulder was petrified, but now most of the petrification has fallen and there is only slight skin hardening left that restricts his hand movement. Therefore, according to Kuroto's estimates, his hands should be back to full working condition within 3 to 5 days. Soon Kuroto read the list of visitors recorded by Shirsue's clone. In the 20 days that Kuroto was out of the village, the one to visit most frequently was obviously his fiancée Hyuga Yui, then there were Kakashi and Guy who are also part of the same team, 11, and finally, there were some other Hyuga people that visited him these days. Obviously, all of them were turned away by Shirsue's clone, under the pretext of learning a jutsu in isolation. Even Yui was turned away. Kuroto smiled helplessly while wondering how he will make it up to her. Anyway, that aside, based on this information and other things, Kuroto judged that no one other than Shirsue was aware or noticed his absence in Konoha, which is a good thing. After some more small talk, Shirsue's shadow clone said goodbye and disappeared with a puff of smoke. At this time, Kuroto unwrapped his right hand that was bandaged carefully, and started to silently circulate the Tenseigan chakra mode around his right hand to wash out the natural energy. Although he was pretty casual about it, but with the movement of his right hand being restricted, Kuroto's combat effectiveness has dropped significantly. The most important point is that he can't use his right hand to print hand seals in this state, so until his hand recovers completely, Kuroto can't even enter into the Tenseigan chakra mode, as that also require hand seals. Not only that, but he also can't use other ninjutsu or fuinjutsu, and his taijutsu will obviously be limited. Therefore, putting every other thing aside, his top priority is to restore his right hand into the best working condition as soon as possible. Knock, knock, knock. Before long there was a sudden knock at the gate of his house. While sitting in the drawing room to continue the chakra circulation, Kuroto glanced towards the gate with the Tenseigan and noticed that it was none other than Shirsue who arrived here. After simply covering his hand with a wet cloth, Kuroto opened the door and led Shirsue inside while asking, "Looking at you, you seem to be in a panic, Shirsue." Shirsue said while still catching his breath because of rushing here hurriedly, "Kuroto-san, something happened." Kuroto wasn't surprised by Shirsue's answer because while sneaking inside, he felt that there was something wrong with the village's atmosphere, and looking at Shirsue's serious expression his guess was only confirmed. "Alright, come in and explain everything that happened while I was away." As soon as both were seated, Shirsue immediately informed him of Uchiha Kurumi's death at the hands of a root ninja, then the root ninja's subsequent explanation as well as his personal guesses on the entire situation. After listening to Shirsue's explanation, Kuroto muttered to himself, "Why is this Uchiha Shinichi involved again?" Even about 20 days ago when Kuroto was about to sneak out of the village, Shirsue mentioned to him that the root ninja responsible for monitoring Shinichi strangely went missing, which caused some tension between Uchiha clan and the village. And now after 20 days, as soon as he sneaked back into the village, there is another matter involving Uchiha Shinichi that has escalated the conflict between the Uchiha clan and the village to a more serious degree. This series of events made Kuroto pay more attention to Uchiha Shinichi. Although never mentioned in the original series, Uchiha Shinichi is around the same age as Kuroto, even if his strength is not among the best within the Uchiha clan at this stage, but the fact that he has already awakened the 3 Tomo Sharingan for quite some time, so his talent is also quite evident considering his young age. After all, if that were not the case, then how come the proud and arrogant Uchiha clan sent him to confront Hyuga Kuroto? And now that he thinks about it, Uchiha Shinichi's personality is also quite straightforward, and straightforward people are the best high-class mob-class chess pieces to have. With all that clear, Kuroto muttered to himself, could it be possible that Obito has set his sight on Uchiha Shinichi? He thinks this because Shinichi shouldn't be the type of person to kill the girl he loved. Kuroto can be sure of this. And since Obito often played around Konoha and even sneaked into the Uchiha clan's Naka shrine several times, so Kuroto can't rule out the possibility that this is all Obito's handiwork. But how come that idiot decided to act now? Shouldn't he be making his moves for Itachi a few years later? Or is it the legendary butterfly effect that's caused because of my presence? Thought Kuroto. Kuroto can't even be sure about it, because even if there wasn't any mention of such a thing happening in the original story, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, so Kuroto is a little confused. And there is also the fact the current Konoha is quite different than it should have been. The most important point is the time of defection of his teacher Orochimaru and the changes following that. Kuroto has still not figured out the real reason for his teacher's early defection. Putting aside the thought about a certain snake, Kuroto focused on the matter at hand and asked Shisui, "So, where is Shinichi now?" Shisui didn't expect Kuroto-san to ask this suddenly, but even if he was surprised, Shisui quickly answered, he was temporarily locked inside a prison room by Patriarch's order to let him stay there until the situation is resolved and his emotions calm down. After nodding a little, Kuroto asked again, has there been any significant improvement in his pupil power? I mean, did you notice it? Yes, he was even able to break through a genjutsu that I cast upon him, which surprised me completely. Shisui nodded while recalling the scene where Shinichi easily broke through a genjutsu that Shisui cast upon Shinichi. As soon as he heard Shisui say this, Kuroto flicked Shisui's forehead and chided him a little, haven't I already told you to not get overconfident of your genjutsu skills? This time you got lucky that it was a person who didn't have any hatred or bad intention towards you, otherwise, you will suffer. While rubbing the spot that was a little itchy due to Kuroto-san's flick, Shisui smiled lightly. Still not taking me seriously, are you? Kuroto spoke helplessly, noticing Shisui's naughty smile. After sighing lightly, he removed the cloth covering his right hand and showed it to Shisui. Look, incidents such as these happen with even a bit of carelessness. Looking at Kuroto-san's hand, Shisui gulped nervously and finally nodded repeatedly and promised, okay, I'll be careful from now on. It's good that you understand, anyway, putting that aside. Nodding at Shisui's response, Kuroto asked while going back to the topic, why do you think that the person hiding in the shadows used the root ninja to kill Uchiha Kurumi, and also let Shinichi witness the scene? After a little bit of thinking, Shisui replied while looking away from Kuroto-san's right hand, he wants to provoke conflict between the Uchiha and the village. Shaking his head helplessly, Kuroto replied with a smile, that's half of the intentions, I suppose. Only half. Then what is the other part? Shisui asked in confusion. Yeah, this reminds me of a similar incident, a bad routine. Muttered Kuroto. Why is this a bad routine? Because so many people use them. But why do many people use them? Because the freaking thing always works. The routine. But Shisui was confused as he didn't understand what in the Sam Hill was Kuroto-san talking about. Without any intention of explaining, Kuroto said, come on, take me to meet him, I would like to have a talk with him. Konoha Police Office, Shinichi's prison room. A spiraling vortex appeared in the gloomy confinement cell, and our very own masked man walked out of it leisurely. Uchiha Shinichi, who was sitting in the corner while covering his head and busy in some thoughts, didn't notice the arrival of the masked man. Chuckling comically while looking at Shinichi's depressed look, he spoke in a deep voice, hey there, I heard about all things that happened with you, and I figured I should pay you a visit, and now I am looking at your gloomy state, so I can't help but speak. Do you want some help? Upon hearing the voice of the person who left a deep impression on him, Shinichi stood up slowly and asked while turning his eyes to look at the masked man, it was you, wasn't it? As soon as he spoke this sentence, the three tomo rapidly spinning in his Sharingan finally merged together and changed into a strange pattern. The masked man was surprised at the sudden change and spoke with a chuckle, since you have awakened those eyes, then it's time for you to see through the truth of this false world. While wearing a simple yukata and keeping his right hand in the side pocket, Kuroto was casually walking down the streets as if he was on a casual shopping trip. Following behind him was Shisui, who tried his best to not let the depression get on his face. Midway down to their destination, Shisui couldn't help but ask in confusion, Kuroto-san, why do you want to meet Shinichi? Shaking his head lightly, Kuroto murmured only for Shisui to hear, not something troublesome, just to check his status. Status. Shisui repeated the word in more confusion and asked with a little doubt, what status? But instead of giving much of an explanation, Kuroto diverted the topic as he whispered softly, listen Shisui, when we get there and if I say to someone, so it's you, then you will immediately use Koto Emetsukumi on that person, don't hesitate for even a single second and use all your pupil power on him, understand? Shisui was a little surprised when he heard this, but Kuroto-san, Koto Emetsukumi is a forbidden technique that can modify a person's will, how can I use it so casually? Glancing slightly at Shisui, Kuroto shook his head and sighed helplessly, if you haven't even considered using Koto Emetsukumi in battle, then why did you even bother talking about it to others? Shisui was silent hearing Kuroto-san's words. No longer bothering to play anymore, Kuroto bluntly said, I suspect that Uchiha Shinichi may have been in contact with the person who is pulling all the strings from the shadows, therefore, we can't rule out the possibility that we may encounter that person when we are visiting Shinichi. For Obito, who has access to Kamui, Konoha village is just like his personal back garden, he can come and go freely whenever he wants, wherever he wants, and however he wants. So, if Uchiha Shinichi was really being targeted by Obito, then it's not impossible for Kuroto and Shisui to bump into him when they are going to check Shinichi's status, and Kuroto can be sure that Obito shouldn't be aware of Shisui's Koto Ematsukami at this point in the timeline, so if this plan really worked then most of the problems will be solved instantly. Listening to Kuroto-san, Shisui smiled disapprovingly. You're kidding, right Kuroto-san? Shinichi is locked in the prison cell of Konoha Military Police Office, how can the person hiding in the shadows come there? From Shisui's perspective, the security of the Konoha Military Police Office is second only to that of the Hokage office. So, no matter how strong the man behind the scenes may be, it's impossible for him to sneak into Shinichi's prison cell silently without alerting any of the Uchiha ninjas present there. Kuroto didn't try explaining, and said directly, of course, I am saying just in case, if by some chance we do encounter him, make sure to not hesitate at all, and also don't make any tentative attacks. Directly use Koto Ematsukami and solve the biggest problem once and for all. Make sure to use all the strength in that one attempt, because the other party is more than likely to have Menjikyu, so if you don't go all out, you might not be able to control him. Although Shisui was still not very sure, he nodded nonetheless. If what Kuroto-san is saying is really true then it might just be the best option. With that decided, both of them continued traveling towards the Konoha Military Police Office. Konoha Military Police Office, Shinichi's prison cell. The truth of this false world. Shinichi muttered the masked man's words with confusion clearly visible in his eyes. By now he has already realized that he has awakened the dojutsu above 3 Tomo Sharingan, but awakening Menjikyu didn't please him in the slightest. On the contrary, Shinichi fell into self-blame, guilt, and loneliness. Because after he was put into the prison cell, Shinichi realized with hindsight that the person to be actually responsible for Kurumi's death is he, neither was it the root ninja, nor is it the masked man, but he, Uchiha Shinichi. If not for him then Kurumi wouldn't have become a target of their play in the first place. So, the root problem is he. Uchiha Shinichi is the one who caused Kurumi's death. And this was the moment he finally awakened those cursed eyes. After a long silence, Shinichi said with his fist clenched, I don't know about this false world or whatever you are speaking and I guess I should be grateful to you for letting me clearly see the true face of this village and the clan, but all that aside, you'll still have to die for manipulating that root ninja to kill Kurumi. The masked ignored Uchiha Shinichi's last words and said while crossing his hands over his chest, go to Naka Shrine, there you will learn the truth on the stone tablet in the secret room. Leaving these words, the masked man didn't give Shinichi any other opportunity and directly vanished into the spiraling vortex. Obviously, masked man doesn't know what kind of technique Uchiha Shinichi might have awakened in his Menjikyu, so unless he understands that, the masked man is not sure to win Shinichi in the shortest time possible, so he didn't want to risk fighting Uchiha Shinichi in the middle of Konoha village and attract the attention of all parties. Besides, most of his goal has already been achieved. The birth of Uchiha Shinichi's Menjikyu that is full of hatred for the Konoha village and the Uchiha clan, is more than enough to satisfy him for now. Even if the masked man is unable to bring Shinichi under his command, he has nothing to lose anyway. So, without paying any mind to Shinichi's words, he simply disappeared. After the masked man left, Shinichi glanced at the spot the other party disappeared at with a gloomy expression. Initially, he thought that with the Menjikyu Sharingan, he might be able to see through the other party's weird jutsu, but unexpectedly even when the masked man disappeared right in front of him, Shinichi still couldn't see the slightest of clue on the guy's techniques. Just who in the hell is he? Thought Shinichi as he deactivated the Menjikyu and sat back at his previous spot. The truth. False world. Naka Shrike. I guess I'll have to check that out. Murmured Shinichi before returning back to the gloomy silence. Outside Konoha Military Police Office. When Hyuga Kuroto arrived at the front of the Konoha Military Police Office, he was subject to both hostile and curious attention of the Uchiha clansmen working around. Noticing that everyone directed their attention on Kuroto-san, especially not in a good way, Shisui said with a little awkward expression, Kuroto-san please don't mind them. Kuroto just smiled and said nothing. Obviously, he was expecting this, his reputation in the village was built up by stepping over the Uchiha through several challenges. This series of defeating Uchihas flared up his reputation into one of the strongest of his generation to the extent that his name also became a hot topic during tea conversations throughout the village. It wasn't just because of his strength but also his identity. The collision between the shinobi of Konoha's two mightiest clans has always been an attractive topic of discussion. And this was also the reason why Shimura Danzo personally came to invite him to join the root unit. If not for Kuroto to have stepped over the Uchiha, then even if he became special Jonin, Danzo might not have paid special interest in personally recruiting him. Therefore, Kuroto wasn't troubled by all the stares he was getting, rather he was amused, and was wondering about who to step over next time for increasing his reputation further. While Kuroto was busy musing, Shisui thought of the grudge that Uchiha Shinichi has with Kuroto-san, and he couldn't help but feel a little headache because of it. To not make the matters worse, Shisui had to warn Kuroto-san in advance. Kuroto-san, Shinichi may have some enmity with you, so if he says something he shouldn't, please ignore that. With Kurumi's death, his emotional state has been quite unstable lately, so please don't mind his aggressive behavior. Kuroto nodded in understanding. Don't worry, it's not like I am here for that anyway. Breathing a sigh of relief at Kuroto-san's understanding, Shisui led Kuroto into the police office. After obtaining permission from the Patriarch Uchiha Fugaku, Shisui and Kuroto went to the prison cell where Shinichi was being held. Noticing Uchiha Shinichi sitting in the corner of the dark and gloomy cell, Shisui immediately called the guy. Shinichi, I am here to explain the entire story to you. Shinichi raised his head and looked at Shisui with an indifferent expression, then moved his gaze past Shisui and finally landed on Hyuga Kuroto. Shisui was a little afraid that Shinichi might attack Kuroto-san, so he hurriedly stepped in front of Kuroto-san. The very reason why Shinichi was going out of the village to practice was to defeat Kuroto-san, so Shisui was a little worried. How will Shinichi respond to Kuroto-san's presence? But unexpectedly, Shinichi didn't stare at Kuroto for too long and brought his head back to its previous position. The way he responded to the presence of the two was like he was completely ignoring them. Noticing Shinichi's behavior, both Kuroto and Shisui glanced at each other with the same expression that stated, something's wrong with him. For an instant, both Kuroto and Shisui felt that there was something wrong with Uchiha Shinichi. The reason for such thinking was that according to their understanding, Shinichi was acting quite differently from how his personality is. With Shinichi's bold and straightforward type of personality, it would have been normal if he got a little hysterical and shouted at both of them, or maybe even cry a little with what he has experienced, but he shouldn't be so calm and indifferent. Shisui couldn't help but feel sadness looking at Shinichi's condition. Undoubtedly, Kurumi's death has had a severe blow on him. Even Kuroto was a little thoughtful at the moment. At this time Shisui decided to explain the situation to Shinichi, but before he could start, Shinichi waved his hand and said indifferently, someone has already told me the entire story, so you don't have to repeat it, please just go away, I want to stay alone. Shisui turned to look at Kuroto seeking any help in the matter. After pondering a little at what Shinichi said, Kuroto nodded towards Shisui while adding, let's go. Sighing helplessly, Shisui followed Kuroto out of Shinichi's cell. After taking one last glance at him, both Kuroto and Shisui left. Walking out of the police station, Kuroto asked Shisui, when will he be released? The Patriarch only wanted to let Shinichi calm down, so he should be released by tomorrow, replied Shisui. Kuroto nodded silently at Shisui's response as both of them began to walk down the street. While following Kuroto-san's footsteps, Shisui suddenly recalled how Shinichi's temperament has changed drastically, and he asked Kuroto in a puzzled manner about something that Kuroto-san said. Kuroto-san, you mentioned that you wanted to check Shinichi's status. What did you mean by that? Waving his hand slightly, Kuroto added a perfunctory sentence. Oh, I just said that casually, as I was just a little curious is all, don't worry too much about it. And as if he remembered something suddenly, Kuroto reminded Shisui, be careful during this period and do not forget what I said while we were coming here. If by some chance you encounter the man behind the scenes, do not hesitate to use Koto Ematsukami, understand? Although a little skeptical, Shisui nodded nonetheless. It's not like he has any better option, and if what Kuroto-san said is really true, then it's the best they have. Upon reaching an agreement, Kuroto bid farewell to Shisui, and without wasting any time by wandering around the streets, he directly returned home. While he visited Shinichi's prison cell, Kuroto was able to perceive the severe increase of Yin nature within Shinichi, so even if Kuroto isn't sure whether Shinichi really awakened Menjikyu, he still has to think of corresponding countermeasures in advance. If I were him, what would I do just after awakening Menjikyu Sharingan? While continuing to wash out natural energy from his right hand, Kuroto tried to think of Uchiha Shinichi's follow-up actions by putting himself in Shinichi's position, and also considered how he can gain benefit from this whole fiasco. But after thinking a little, Kuroto discarded putting himself in Shinichi's position. This is not because he finds it troublesome or anything, but it's just that, grasping the thinking process of an Uchiha is not what others can do, let alone an Uchiha who is highly unstable by having possibly awakened the Manjikyu. So, changing his course of thinking, Kuroto muttered, no matter how paranoid his thoughts get, or how cold and indifferent he become, there is one thing that I can be sure of, that he would not give up, and his revenge. No matter what, he wouldn't give up revenge. Not every Uchiha has an Uzumaki Naruto for him, so revenge is the likely course. Therefore, the next thing to consider is who will be his first target. Next day. According to Shirsue's guess, after noticing that Shinichi has calmed down quite a lot, Uchiha Fugaku released him from prison. Uchiha Shinichi, who had gained his freedom, didn't cause any trouble anywhere and directly returned to his house. The whole day passed by silently with nothing changing. Shirsue made sure to check up on Shinichi once in the evening and reported his situation to Kuroto. Nodding at Shinichi's silent behavior, Kuroto was more sure of his guess. Late at night, Shinichi sneaked out of his home dressed in black attire and rushed towards the Naka Shrine. At the Naka Shrine, the two Uchiha who were responsible for keeping watch at the shrine were chatting casually. By the way, do you think the war with the Cloud escalate again? Humph, does it matter? We Konoha aren't afraid of Cloud Village. If things get worse, then the Uchiha will support Konoha like always. Hahaha, that's true. As the two were chatting casually, suddenly the sound of footsteps was heard. Both of them became a little alert, while one of them muttered with a frown, it's already so late, who will visit here at this time? While both of them looked in the direction of footsteps alertly, the gate of the shrine opened and Uchiha Shinichi, dressed in a black vest, walked inside. Shinichi. After an exclamation, both of them relaxed their guard and asked in a confused manner, Shinichi, it's too late already, how come you are visiting here, did Patriarch send you? Without bothering to respond, Shinichi just looked at the Uchiha who asked him the question. Bang! With just Shinichi's gaze, the person fainted and fell to the ground with a muffled noise. Another Uchiha noticed that Shinichi didn't cast any attack but just a simple genjutsu, so even if he was more alert, he didn't attack immediately but asked strangely, what are you doing, Shinichi? But before he could get any response, he too fainted just like the other one. Both of them were put in genjutsu and fainted. Walking past the two fainted clansmen, Shinichi activated his Manjikyu, and after carefully scanning the surrounding with his eyes, he finally found the entrance to the secret room under a stone brick. Entering the secret room, he stumbled upon his target, the stone tablet. After a long time passed, Shinichi finally muttered to himself, is this the truth you speak of? A few days later. Huh, finally done! Exclaimed Kuroto in joy as he moved his right hand with a relieved expression. After several days of hard work, Kuroto was finally able to expel the remaining of the natural collected in his right hand, therefore, restoring it to its peak state. With the right hand recovered, his combat ability was back to his peak state. And dealing with natural energy for the past few days also gave Kuroto some understanding of it. The most critical thing that he has realized is that natural energy is way too dangerous. Thinking of what happened to his hand, Kuroto couldn't help but think, it's no wonder that there are very few people who have learned senjutsu. Even in the original story, even by the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War, there were only a handful of known people to have mastered senjutsu in the past millennia. And Kuroto can bet that out of all those, whether known or known, most of them would definitely be Azura's reincarnation. After all, both Hashirama and Naruto were. Just imagine that even shinobi like Orochimaru couldn't use senjutsu. From this alone one can imagine just how difficult it is. So, Kuroto decided to put that aside for now, because he doesn't have any clue on how to advance in senjutsu, and if he tried rashly, the danger is too high. Although Kuroto knows that without taking risks it is difficult to experience adventure, he still can't be too carefree about it. But even if he put aside senjutsu for now, Kuroto still won't be free, as he has had a whole new idea. From his last combat in the Land of Wind, Kuroto was able to gain more insight into the characteristics of the Tenseigan Chakra mode and at the same time judge many of his shortcomings. Using Truth-Seeking Ball, for example, he is able to condense Truth-Seeking Ball in the Tenseigan Chakra mode, but this is actually a little bit of cheating because by nature Kuroto doesn't have access to all the 7 chakra nature, much less fusion of the 7 to give birth to something like Truth-Seeking Balls. Therefore, Kuroto said that's its cheating. Although it doesn't matter when looking at the big picture, but sometimes to have a quality improvement, one has to consider and focus on many small details. So, to completely solve this problem, he has to get down to its root cause. In short, he has to gain these 7 chakra natures and fuse them into one, to successfully achieve Kekkei Mora, i.e., bloodline encompassing. being able to do such a thing is obviously next to impossible according to common sense. This is because, in the current shinobi world, only Otsutsuki Kagaya's Byakugan and Otsutsuki Hagoromo's Rinnegan can be classified as Kekkei Mora, while all others are Kekkei Genkai or Kekkei Toda. But Kuroto has come up with a method that is close to fantasy, but if this fantasy can be realized, then it wouldn't be impossible for him to reach godhood. However, to bring this dream to fruition, Kuroto needs to make a lot of preparation, many of which are also unrealistic from a certain perspective, and it is still unknown whether they can be realized, but that's what a researcher does, right? Staring at the long list stacked with so many requirements in his hand, Kuroto couldn't help but already feel a little discouraged. To complete his grand vision, there are too many requirements, including things like pieces of equipment, the latest technological devices, various types of material requirement, and all other types of tricky stuff, and the paper in his hand only contained the list he just sorted out casually, and it's already so much. Kuroto can be sure that even if this list is so long, it is still not even 1/10 of all that would actually be required. It's almost impossible for me to realize this fantasy on my own. Kuroto shook his head in annoyance as he put the list aside. No doubt if he really wants his dream to become a reality, then it can't be completed on his power alone. Kuroto would definitely need the support of his clan, the support of Konoha village, and most important of all, he would need the support of his teacher, Orochimaru. And playing with the snake is too dangerous. After brainstorming a little, Kuroto muttered while destroying the list in his hands, "It looks like I am going to rebuild a new laboratory." The laboratory that Orochimaru left to him is just a simple laboratory that focuses on genetic observations. Although Kuroto did make some small modifications to it on his own, they were only limited to adding some petri dishes and genetic extraction. At the core, the laboratory doesn't have any condition to carry out large-scale experiments and in vivo testing that will be involved in his grand vision. Although this is also the main reason why even if Orochimaru has been aware of the changes in Kuroto for some time, he still believes that it is unrelated to Kuroto's research on Hyuga clan's genetics, as Orochimaru still doesn't believe that Kuroto would have obtained a significant result in his research of the Byakugan. Because the laboratory left to Kuroto by Orochimaru simply doesn't have the conditions to carry out large-scale experiments. From Orochimaru's perspective, all successful test results are stacked upon a countless number of failures, so he doesn't believe that Kuroto would skip the most important part of a scientific study, i.e., test on live subjects. Of course, this is only because Orochimaru isn't aware of the existence of the Tenseigan and his disciples' reckless approach to it. After all, Kuroto being able to survive genetic recombination is all thanks to Lady Luck. Even in retrospect, Kuroto himself is scared of the reckless action that he dared to do at the time. After surviving the incident, Kuroto tried estimating the general probability of his survival removing the luck factor. And the results were nothing short of horrifying. Based on his mediocre aptitude, Kuroto had to survive 16 genetic recombinations. Being able to survive single genetic recombination is nothing short of a miracle, as it's already a deal with death, not to mention 16 times in a row. The success rate of the experiment is even less than 0.001%. But he hit the jackpot. As a result, he survived. However, even if Kuroto succeeded once because of his luck doesn't mean that he can always rely on it, so he will not gamble it all on luck from now on. All the subsequent experiments will first go through rigorous demonstration and many in vivo testings. Once all the safety is confirmed, only then will he use those results upon him. With that decision, Kuroto took out the scroll of the artificial tailed beast project he obtained from Orochimaru, and after recording some data and his personal experience in creating Ryumyaku, he sealed it again. Kuroto can hide his possession of Ryumyaku from the rest of the world, but not from his teacher, Orochimaru. After all, Kuroto obtained the scroll of the artificial tailed beast from Orochimaru. And since Kuroto has already promised to share the data he obtains at the beginning, and considering that he still needs the teacher's support for the completion of his grand vision in the future, so doesn't want to break away from his cooperative relationship with Orochimaru yet. Besides, Kuroto speculates that Orochimaru wouldn't be very interested in the artificial tailed beast anyway. It should be known that even if Orochimaru wants to learn the secrets of the shinobi world, he still has too many research projects at his hands, whether it is Cursed Seal of Heaven or Earth, Impure World Reincarnation, Living Corpse Reincarnation, or 8 Branches Technique, etc., are all promising projects and require too much time investment even for someone as genius as Orochimaru. Therefore, Kuroto is more assured. Kuchios no Jutsu. With a puff of smoke, the one-eyed viper, slithering its tongue, appeared in front of Kuroto. After inserting the scroll into the one-eyed viper's mouth, Kuroto said nothing extra and directly undid the summon, sending away the scroll. Of course, Kuroto has one more intention by sending the data on the artificial tailed beast to Orochimaru. And that is to let Orochimaru vaguely understand that since he has become Ryu Myaku's Jinchuriki, therefore the two sides will no longer have a superior and subordinate relationship. Kuroto would no longer be Orochimaru's one-sided spy, so further cooperation will be based on an equal relationship. After sending away the summoned snake, Kuroto thought of the need for an assistant. All of his ideas are too complicated, therefore, he needs an assistant who is both loyal and competent at the same time, just like Kabuto was to Orochimaru. But extraordinary geniuses like Kabuto are too hard to find. Kuroto can be sure that it would be close to impossible to have someone of Kabuto's level at his side. After all, aside from his scientific achievements, the guy was able to learn senjutsu, so his strength is also nothing to be scoffed at. In this field, his talent might have even surpassed Orochimaru and Jiraiya. After thinking of the need for an assistant, Kuroto's thought diverged to the problem of funds. It's true that as a shinobi of the Hyuga clan, Kuroto has no financial problem, as well as the inheritance left by his parents, but all that combined is also not even close to what would be actually required. Sigh. Funding is also a big problem, muttered Kuroto while sighing. It looks like his dream has so many hurdles that for a moment it feels better to just give it up. Knock, knock, knock. While Kuroto was being helpless at the lack of resources at his hands, there was a sudden knock that brought him out of the gloomy mood. Looking past the gate by his Byakugan, Kuroto found that it's none other than his fiancée, Yui, waiting outside with a basket. Letting her inside, Kuroto said with a cheerful smile, "It seems that today my luck is good, I get to have your cooking." Passing a sweet smile, Yui placed the basket she was carrying on the table, while asking curiously, "So, Kuroto-kun, what kind of jutsu were you studying these days that you didn't even let me in?" "Ha, that's a secret," said Kuroto while nervously scratching his hair. Kuroto suspects that she would see through his lie, so it's better to just divert the topic. After some casual conversation, Kuroto tasted the dish Yui brought. He has to agree that Yui is very talented when it comes to cooking. The taste of some simple dishes is, in fact, comparable to that of the famous restaurants in the village. Yui saw Kuroto-kun savor her cooking and she smiled happily while looking at him. Keeping one hand over her cheeks, she said lightly, "Hizashi-sama asked me to thank you for Uncle Haruto's successful promotion to Jonin rank." Waving his hand indifferently, Kuroto nodded slightly. "I didn't help much in the matter." After eating up his fill, Kuroto and Yui talked to each other about all sorts of things. It's been so long since he enjoyed such a peaceful day. Undoubtedly, he has been mentally exhausted with all sorts of events, so, before Kuroto even realized it, he was already asleep with his head laying on her lap. Yui's POV. Seeing Kuroto-kun sleeping peacefully while resting his head over her lap, Yui couldn't help but remember the time from their childhood up to now. The life of a shinobi is really not easy. Ever since their graduation, one after another, all sorts of events kept happening. Becoming a genin was supposed to be the big day, but on that very day, she learned that Kuroto-kun's parents have passed away. Ever since then, Kuroto-kun changed slightly, the previous sleepy expression of his changed to what he is now. Sometimes Yui feels really sad and worried at how hard he has been pushing himself. Kuroto-kun might think that she doesn't know it, he thinks that he can hide it from her, but she could see it clearly. The struggle he has been putting in is not something that's been hidden from her. Thinking of what Kuroto-kun might have to go through, silent tears escaped her eyes and dripped along her cheek. Yui instantly wiped away the tear and did not let it fall on Kuroto-kun's face. She doesn't want to make him worried about her in the slightest. What else can she do other than silently supporting him? Kuroto-kun might think that she hasn't noticed his absence for the past 20 or so days, but on the first conversation with the person who was covering for his absence, she deduced that it wasn't Kuroto-kun but somebody else. Initially worried, but she put faith in the person whom she loves more than anything in the world and kept it all a secret within her heart. While lightly rubbing Kuroto-kun's sleeping face, Yui kissed his forehead with a promise, "No matter what you become, I promise Kuroto-kun, I'll always stand behind you to ease your loneliness." Is that her own resolution? Or is it her belief? Yui doesn't know, but what she knows is that if it's for Kuroto-kun, then she would do everything in the world because Kuroto-kun is more important for her than the world itself. P.O.V. change. The good time always comes to an end faster. Before they even noticed, the sun has already set and the sky started getting darker. Clatter. Kuroto's sleep was broken by the noise that came from his rooftop. Judging from the sound, it should be caused by the footsteps of a ninja passing over his rooftop. Yui frowned at the noise that broke Kuroto-kun's sleep. It's rude to pass over others' house. Seeing Kuroto-kun wake up, Yui said in slight irritation. Getting up and stretching a little, Kuroto calmed down Yui and walked up to the window to check the situation. Under normal circumstances, the ninjas in the village would definitely not pass over the roof of other people's houses casually, at most it would be done only during an urgent mission or some emergency circumstances. And since someone did it, then that means some emergency situation is taking place. Reaching up to the terrace, Kuroto looked out to check if he could see what's the situation. And strangely enough, he saw that many figures were moving through the rooftop of houses all over the village in the cover of night. With a single glance, Kuroto noticed that they were all rushing towards the center of the village, i.e., towards the Hokage building. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.